there. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Saturday, and for today's video, I have a thrift flip for you, and then I finished up mostly the little footstool. Unfortunately, as I explained in the video, I ordered some fringe for the bottom of it that never showed up from Amazon, and I still need to go back and put some fabric on the base of it, but other than that, it is done, and I'm so happy with how it came out, you guys. It was very nerve-wracking, but I'm glad I got it finished. So without further ado, let's get to the projects I completed for today. I have had this little wastebasket in my stash for a long time now, you guys, and it takes up quite a bit of room on my shelf, and I figured it was finally time to do something with it. So I started by mixing up some Durham's water putty and filling some of the screw holes on the sides of this. Some of them still had little stoppers in them, and I tried to get the little stoppers out, but I just could not to make everything match. So I decided rather than do that, I would just fill the holes. So I let that all dry, and then I'm taking it outside and giving it a really good sanding with some 150 grit sandpaper. And thankfully, as I was sanding this, I realized that the little stoppers were sanding down flush as well. So everything looked really nice and even when I was done sanding. Now, after many years of use as a garbage can, this little thing had some pretty significant stains on the inside. So I went ahead and sanded that out really well as well to try and get rid of as many of them as I could. Then it was just a matter of sanding the handles down really well. And I went ahead and sanded both sides and around the edges of both handles. Now I did take this and rinse it off really well in my sink before I started painting. And of course I let it dry completely before I started putting the paint on it. And for the paint on this, I decided to go with Sweet Pickins Milk Paint, and this color is called Creamy. Now I didn't add any extra bond to my paint. I figured if I got a little bit of crackling or any chippiness, that would enhance the kind of vintage feel of this little wastebasket. Now, after I'd given the entire thing one good coat of paint, I realized the inside was having some bleed through issues, and there were a couple stains that were kind of peeking up underneath that paint. So I went ahead and gave the inside of this little wastebasket a really good coat of shellac to try and trap all of that underneath the paint. Then, of course, I moved on to painting the little handles. I did end up painting both sides of both of them with approximately 3 coats of paint. Now, it did end up taking me 3 good coats of that creamy paint to cover up all of the dark places in the wood underneath. And between the second and third coats, I went ahead and used my hair dryer to give a little bit of heat to that paint to see if I could eke out any crackle, which it did end up crackling a little bit. Not a whole heck of a lot, but when you look closely, you can definitely see some beautiful cracking in that paint. I was a bit nervous when I went to put the second coat of my paint on the inside of the wastebasket. I was really hoping that the shellac had managed to stop all of those stains from leaching through my paint, and luckily enough, it really worked. So I did have to go over this again with a third coat of paint, but I did not have to shellac it again. Once all my paint was completely dry, I took it outside and gave it a really good sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper to get it nice and smooth, and to also do a little bit of distressing. I definitely wanted some of that beautiful rich wood tone shining up through that creamy paint to really enhance the vintage feel of this little wastebasket. I went around the sides and the edges and just brought a little bit of that wood tone back through. And you're not going to see it here, but I did go back in and sand the bottom of it as well to clean it up really well, and around the edges and the rim, of course. I went ahead and hand sanded the handles. They're a little bit harder to hold on to and use a rotary sander on. So this was definitely a little bit easier solution to sanding and distressing them. Then it was on to decorating my little wastebasket, and for that I chose this cute little transfer set by Redesign with Prima. This one's called Froggy Meadow Greens. This is the midi size transfer set, and it comes in 3 8.5 by 11 sheets, all with cute little frogs and beautiful flowers. So I tore the back sheet off of my transfer and then just laid it down where I wanted it, smoothed it out with my hands, and then began applying my transfer. I'm just using the transfer stick that comes in the packet, and I am rubbing that transfer down onto my piece while I slowly peel back that piece of vellum, just being careful to make sure that all of my transfer is well adhered as I peel it back. Once I had the whole thing applied, I went ahead and ran my fingers up the seams just to make sure that they were stuck down really well, and then I burnished my transfer in with a piece of that vellum. Then it was on to the other side, and I decided to go with the coordinating frog on the back side of this little wastebasket so that it kind of matched the front side. So again, just laying it down, rubbing it with the transfer stick, and peeling back that piece of vellum. Now, I really loved the look of these frogs on this creamy color, but I felt like this wastebasket still needed a little something. It seemed like there was too much white and not enough decor, I guess. And so I pulled out this beautiful stencil by Redesign with Prima. This one's called Anisa. It's by Katja. And I'm using faded burlap and a little stencil brush. And I am really carefully dry brushing a little bit of faded burlap into that stencil. I just wanted a very faint, faded, almost worn off look to my stencil, just to give it a little bit more texture. So this is kind of what it looks like. And I went ahead and did that same thing to all 4 sides of the wastebaskets. Now, during this process, I realized that a small piece of my transfer had peeled up, so I'm using a little bit of Sweet Pickins top coat as a decoupage medium, basically, and I am just gluing that transfer back down with that medium. And once my little repair is dry, it's time to seal my paint. And for that, I am grabbing my DIY clear wax to start. And I'm giving all sides and the inside of this, as well as the bottom, one good coat of DIY clear wax. I'm just rubbing that on with my soft bristle brush and then wiping the excess back with a dry shop towel. Once I was finished with the clear wax, I decided to go back in with just a touch of DIY's dark wax, mainly in the crevices and around the edges of this little wastebasket to add a little bit more age and patina and a tad of grunginess. This is a wastebasket. It's been very used, and I wanted to kind of stay true to that look. So I'm just adding a little bit of that dark wax around the edges and again down those little grooves in each panel. Once I have some of that dark wax down, I'm just going back in with a dry shop towel and gently wiping back any excess wax or cleaning it up a little bit where I've gotten too much, and just trying to keep it in the places that I really want it to show. And I find that the trick here to keep my dark wax from being too dark or thick in any one place is to kind of swirl it on with the brush. Once I've got it down, I go back over it in kind of a swirly motion and just blend it very gently and lightly into the places that I want it to be. Then again, using that shop towel to just go back and wipe any areas that are a little darker than I'd like them to be. Then it was time to reattach my handles. I had already put a layer of clear wax on these, and once they were on, I went ahead and went around them with a little bit more of that dark wax to give them a little bit of that patina as well and blend them in with the rest of the piece. Once I was finished with the handles, my little wastebasket project is done. I absolutely love the way this came out. Now, I know it's just a wastebasket, but I absolutely love functional things that are pretty too. I hope you guys like this as much as I do. Now on to my footstool project. So you guys will remember this is what it looked like when I was finished with it on the last video, and now it is time to get it cleaned up and ready for some paint. Now, as I was cleaning this with some crud cutter, I realized that whatever this stain was that was on here was something that they had added on after the fact, and it was basically wiping off in my hands. It made a sticky mess everywhere. But I went ahead and rinsed everything with some clean water anyway, and then I decided that this piece would definitely bleed into my paint. So I went in with some Salvation Solution. This is DIY's product. Unfortunately, I don't have any of this in stock right now. I always seem to forget to order this stuff in. This is out of my can that I've had for probably a couple years now, but I put 2 good even coats of that Salvation Solution on this piece and let it dry completely before I began painting. The color I'm using is one of the brand new Sweet Pickins colors called Antique Ironstone. It's out of the Bespoke collection curated by Jamie Ray Vintage. And in all honesty, you guys, it took me forever to choose this color. I'd already chosen the fabric that I wanted to put on it, and there were several colors in it to pull from, but they all were colors that I had so much of already in the shop, and I really wanted something a bit different. So this ended up matching really, really well with the background of my fabric. So it is what I ended up going with. And again, with this piece, I did not add any extra bond to my paint. I was really hoping for some crackling, and I also used my hairdryer to give it a little bit of heat to help with that. And I did get some, not a whole heck of a lot, but there is some small cracking going on. I did go over this with 3 coats of paint before moving on to sanding it a little bit with some 220 grit sandpaper. This helps knock any chunks down that were left behind by the milk paint, and I'm also doing just a very minimal amount of distressing, just enough to have some of that wood tone peeking back through the paint in the corners. Once I was done with sanding, I wiped everything back down with a damp shop towel before moving on to sealing my milk paint. For that, I decided to go with Sweet Pickins Oil Wax in clear. And the reason I chose clear as opposed to a colored wax was that I really didn't want this color to change at all. It is such a good match for the fabric that's going to be going on the stool the way that it is, and I didn't want to take any chances in changing it. So I'm just using an old chip brush to put a good even layer of that oil wax all over my painted surfaces. And then I'm going to let that sit for about 20 minutes before I come back and just wipe it really well with a dry shop towel. Now, if you watch me tear down this little footstool in my last video, you saw that the inside of it was pretty torn up. The boards were broken and just a mess. So instead of trying to repair or replace that, I had my husband cut me this piece of wood. I needed to sand some of the little splinters off, and this fits nicely over the top of my stool. So I am just using some brad nails and nailing that down in place. Now for my padding, I'm going to start by adding a piece of 2-inch foam to my board, and I'm just making sure I've got enough, and then I'm going to flip this over, mark out my lines with a pen, and then I'm going to use a razor blade, a straight edge, and some scissors to cut out the piece of foam that I need. Once my foam is cut, it's time to adhere it to my footstool, and for that I'm just using some Gorilla spray glue, and then I am laying that foam down and just making sure that it is well attached to my top. Now for a little bit more cushion, I decided to add in some polyfill on top of my foam. So I'm just kind of mounding that up and then using my hands to kind of stretch it out to the corners and try and make it as even as I possibly can. So it's nice, one nice even layer across the top of my footstool. The next layer is batting, and I'm just laying my sheet over it to get a feel for where I need to cut it, and then I'm cutting it to size. I did make it a little bit bigger than I really needed it, but thankfully batting is really inexpensive, and I figured I was better off being safe rather than sorry. Then I went in with my staple gun and stapled the first long side down, flipped it back over, and then just stretched it out to make sure that it was nice and even before I stapled it down on the other side. Then before I stapled the sides down, I went ahead and tucked in a little bit more batting and made sure everything looked nice and even. Once I had that done, I went ahead and stapled down the short sides as well, and then carefully cut around the legs. Now, my mistake here was leaving the batting too long on the legs. I should have cut that up a little bit further. I ended up fighting with it a little bit later on when I went to put my fabric over the top of it. So that is one lesson that I learned as I was doing this. Once I had my batting all down in place and nailed to my footstool, I went ahead and cut away any excess along the base of it and then flipped it over. And here's what it looked like. So here's the fabric that was chosen for this footstool. I actually posted a poll on Facebook asking people to help me decide between a couple different choices, and this was the one that won. And before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and switch out my drop cloth and make sure I've got a clean surface to work on. I had also cut my fabric down to size and steamed the wrinkles out of it before I got started stapling. So as you can see here, I went ahead and added 3 staples on one of the long sides, and then I flipped it back over and just kind of pulled my fabric tight, smoothed everything out, and then went ahead and stapled the other side. Once I had the long sides taken care of, I went ahead and did the same kind of procedure on the short sides, just smoothing and pulling and making sure everything was nice and even before I went ahead and put one staple in that end and then pulled everything tight to put a staple in the other end. Once I was happy with how the upholstery was looking, I went ahead and finished stapling all 4 sides on the bottom. Once I was done with the easy part, it was time to move on to the corners. Now, I have never done an upholstery job where I actually had to go around legs like this. Normally, I do things that you can unscrew and take off and then upholster and then screw back down. Nothing like this where you actually have to pay attention about going around a leg. And this took me so much time, you guys, and a lot of anxiety. I found a video online. You can see there in the background, that's my laptop with the video playing on loop, showing me step by step how to do this procedure without making a mess, and hopefully cutting the fabric in the right places and tucking and folding in all the right places so that I could get a nice corner. Now, I am not going to try to explain every step as I go here. I will post the link to the video I watched in the description box below in case you ever run across something like this and need to know how to do it. It took me a couple hours, in all honesty, of going back and forth, watching the video, doing a step or two, and then watching the video again to get all 4 corners finished. I was so happy when I was done with this thing, you guys. Now, being this was my first time ever doing a project like this, I did make a few little mistakes. One of them was that I had some uneven edges going around the sides of the legs. They weren't perfectly even with each other. So I did order some fringe from Amazon to kind of cover that up and just add a more finished look to the stool. But unfortunately, it never got here in time for this video. So you're not going to see that attached to my footstool. And then also just know that I am going to go back and put some different fabric on the base of it underneath, just to give it a more finished look on the bottom. I just haven't gotten that far yet, you guys, but in a future video, I will definitely show you it completely finished. But for now, this is what it looks like. And here is my awesome corner. That is it from here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my projects and I hope you enjoyed today's video. What did you think of the Froggy wastebasket? I think that was such a fun little project, and I know it's just a functional wastebasket, but who says function can't be fun, right? And what did you guys think of the footstool? I know it's not quite finished yet, but I am so happy with how it turned out. And in all honesty, I'm very glad to have it finished, at least very close to being finished. It was one of the most nerve-wracking projects I've ever done in my life. And I can't tell you how many times I had to watch that video and try and mimic what I saw in the video. And I watched a few seconds and then try and do that. And then I watched a few seconds and try and do that. And My gosh, you guys, it probably took me 45 minutes to do that first corner. So I just don't know that I would look for that kind of a project to do in the future. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry a pretty full range of DIY products, including DIY paint and products, as well as Sweet Pickins Milk Paint and products, Recycled Treasures decoupage papers, which I just reordered some of the ones that I'm out of, so check back with me. I will let you know as soon as I get them in. And of course, some Redesign with Prima. And I went ahead and bit the bullet this time, you guys, and I ordered the entire release that is coming out in April. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, for Wednesday's video, it is definitely going to be a few more thrift flips. So I hope you'll join me back here for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend and beginning of the week. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.